So we are coming to the end of the theory videos for this week. We are halfway through the week. This is a Wednesday. We started off with the Emperor, then we went on to Mortarion, and I thought it's best to end with Roboute. Roboute holds a special place now in the Imperium. He potentially could become divine. He could become a god, not at his own choosing, but by the choosing of the people of the Imperium. Now, before we jump in and explore this and talk about it, again, I'm just going to put the spoiler warning that if you haven't read Godblight, please leave the video on now. The subjects that we've been talking about are all in relation to the latest Godblight book because it opens up a massive amount of different directions they can go with the story. So please, if you haven't read Godblight, leave the video right now. This is your first and only warning. So Guilliman has been a very interesting character so far because he doesn't believe in the divinity of the Emperor. He doesn't believe that the Emperor is a god. He sees the church a means to an end. He's using it at the moment to get the job done. But there's been theories that as soon as that job is done and he doesn't need the church anymore, then he'll come down on the church and dissolve like the imperial cult and stuff. So we try to go back to the times of the so-called Enlightenment when the Emperor trusted in mankind instead of the divinity of gods. Now, the most important thing about this is faith. Now, faith is like, it's not new because we've always had faith and stuff like that because the imperial church. But what we're starting to see now with the new law is that faith is being brought in as a power now. You've probably seen it with, the Sisters of Battle more than anything. But faith is described as being one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. And what we've had now is that faith has been a focal point to the Emperor. So the Emperor might have not have been a god when he went on the Golden Throne, but after the 10,000 years of the faith of the Imperial Church focusing on the Emperor, it may have changed him actually into a god. And what we're seeing now is that this could potentially now affect Guilliman, because Guilliman is the son of the Emperor. So the Imperium sees him as the son of a god. Therefore, Guilliman is worshipped as a god by the billions/trillions of people that are actually in the Imperium. So that power now is being powered into Guilliman. One of the Eldar ambassadors actually makes a note that he says that Guilliman may have already done divine acts actually on the battlefield. He does state that how the warp calms in his presence. That is one example. But another example he states is that during the Plays Wars book, there was a girl who was empowered and she can do things. The Eldar says maybe that wasn't the Emperor. Maybe that was your doing. Your presence on the battlefield inspired this divine intervention because of the faith of the power that you harbor within yourself. Like, he's not actually going out and like holding his hand out and saying, faith, take thee and stuff like that. But there is a power hanging over Guilliman now, down to the worship of him and his father. Of course, Guilliman being Guilliman, he always tries to see the logical knight. He rebukes this, saying, he doesn't have any psychic ability or anything like that. And the Eldar informs him that it's nothing to do with psychic power. It's nothing to do with sorcery at all. It's about faith. Faith, which is the most powerful force in the galaxy. And as I stated, that faith is being pushed into Guilliman by the Imperium. And potentially what we can have now is a story set up where Guilliman is slowly made into a god against his own will. The faith is being pushed into him more, and he gets more and more power. If you can use that faith of the Imperium fully, I think you could become an unstoppable force. It's basically like a chaos god, Khorne himself, Tzeentch, Nurgle themselves, walking among reality to do whatever they want. That is how powerful he can become, in my opinion. It also opens up an interesting thought because Guilliman has always said he doesn't believe in the divinity, doesn't believe that the Emperor is a god. As I stated, he is using the church to a means to an end, and I personally think that once that is over with, he'll bring it down. But if he starts walking around and he sees the power that he has, can he really deny the power of divinity then? If he's walking around and shooting laser beams of light out of his hands and demons are exploding and everything like that, again, I'm just thinking in my head how it would work. Can you really deny that? Can you really step back and actually say, no, I am not a god. I am not divine. When you're actually, shooting all this power, he knows he's not psychic or anything like that. So what is this power that he's using? It's also interesting as well, because what does it mean for the Imperium? What does it mean if you see like a literal god walking on the battlefield? What does that do to someone? Does that send them insane? Does it send them crazy? As I've stated so many times in this video, faith is humanity's greatest weapon, so that is going to empower him even more. If someone sees a god walking, you're going to believe in a god, aren't you? You can think, oh bloody hell, gods are real. Look, there's a god, I'm going to believe in a god. That means he gets more power. Where does this end up? Does Guilliman become the most powerful being in the galaxy? Does he become more powerful than the Emperor? Yes, the Emperor is revered as a god, but if you see a god walking, you're going to believe in that god more than anything. Is Guilliman like going to go down the path where he becomes the de facto new emperor of the Imperium? Like, the Emperor's on the throne guarding everyone, but all the power is literally going to Guilliman because people are seeing his great acts of what he's doing. Again, in the Godblighter book, it does mention that his soul now is set against the belief of billions. I would argue trillions. I think there's trillions of people a part of the Imperium. If you look at the galaxy as a whole and how many planets there is, I would say trillions of people have the belief now in the Emperor and Guilliman. Now, Guilliman, of course, must consider questions about if he is a god or if he is free. So I do think that he's going to come to a certain point in his story where he's going to have to choose between godhood and freedom. And I think that then will infect the Imperium's outcome. If he chooses to be a god, then the church grows stronger. The Imperium, I think, will go stronger. If he chooses to be free, I think that's when he takes the war on the church to try and abolish this old thing of, don't believe in gods, believe in yourself. And potentially that could harm the Imperium rather than do good for it, because then what you'll have is a civil war in the Imperium again. I know we've talked about this between the war of the church and the Imperium. You can have forces like, of course, the Sisters, the Templars, a lot of the Imperial Guard regiments siding with the church, most of the Space Marines and the Admech maybe actually siding with Guilliman, Belisarius Cawl and stuff, and it would do, a bigger wound to the Imperium than probably the Great Rift has done to the galaxy if you have the Civil War at this time. I do think it's a really interesting story now, what they can do with Guilliman. Do I think they'll do this? Probably not. I think they'll keep Guilliman in that state of choosing between like a god, his divine acts and stuff like that. I don't think we'll ever see like Guilliman walking around with like lights coming out of his eyes and stuff, and then, you can't look upon him because your eyes burn out and everything like that. I don't think we'll ever see that version of Roboute. I would like to see it. I'd like to see the story go down that point to see what would potentially could happen, but I don't think the writers themselves, the lore writers, will actually hit that note. Anyway, enough waffling from me. It's been fun. It's been cool as always. Please post your thoughts, comments, anything like that. What do you think of Roboute potentially becoming a god? What do you think about this whole faith now? Again, faith has been a part of the Imperium for ages because the faith of the Imperial Church, but now the faith is becoming a power. It is now, as it states in here, one of the greatest powers, if not the greatest power in the galaxy. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the faith becoming this new mechanic to fight the enemies of mankind? Enough waffling for me. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching as always. See you now. Have a great day and bye-bye.